When I was 13 years old, I was walking home from school in Thornhill, and a really bad car accident happened. The driver was killed immediately upon impact, and there I am at 13 trying to do something, and basically I was found trying to hold the person together when the ambulance arrived. It was at that point that I made myself a promise that I would never feel helpless again. Because I felt powerless, I didn't know what to do. And that began my career, unbeknownst to me, as having this deluded idea that emergencies and disasters can be managed. There's this new career path out there called emergency management. It's not just your frontline people, your fire, police, ambulance. It's the people that actually do the planning, do the mitigation, help recover in municipalities after a disaster. So now there's degree programs, masters in emergency management. But disasters, can they really be managed? So that's one angle. That also got me in my career as a paramedic, because all of a sudden I realized, hey, I like helping people. Then about 2 years later, I was at school, and I was talking with the carpentry teacher. And I just didn't get why he was telling us to do this one procedure the way he was telling us. And in his frustration, he just says, for Pete's sake, John, just do it. We've always done it this way. It's been done that way for the past 40 years. Just do it the way I say. That was the first time I ever said, then there's got to be a better way. And thus began my career as an entrepreneur. So it's a really, really strange paradox to be a disaster management person, a paramedic, and an entrepreneur. Because the two careers, as a paramedic and disaster management, it's very command and control. It's very militaristic. Whereas an entrepreneur is completely freewheeling and the world is your oyster. So I'm weird. Which to me is another definition of outliers. You stand out. You're not afraid to be different and to be weird. It's opened up an amazing world to me, where I've traveled the world, both for disasters and for personal reasons, where I've had a chance to experience the best of humanity, the worst of humanity, and actually had the privilege of gaining a global perspective, which has changed my perspective on life, on relationships, on how I approach everything and every element in my life. So perspective is everything. This is a picture from Hurricane Katrina. Can you imagine yourself in that sheltered area, clinging on to one of those palm trees for dear life, the wind, the sand, the rain, bashing against your face as the storm is coming up? At that moment, that is your sole existence. So your only perspective when you're in the middle of this, for survival, is that moment. But this is where perspective really comes into play. Because while you may have this perspective, somebody else has this perspective. Same storm, exactly the same circumstances, but the perspective is different. In this, it's actually quite beautiful. If you're the one hugging onto the tree, it's not so beautiful, is it? But it really does help illustrate how our perspective of things can make all the difference in the world. I've often said that when you're in the face of a disaster, if you can pull you or your emotions out of the picture, if you can elevate yourself out of the situation, you gain a very unique perspective, which is going to make you better able to manage the situation. Because whether it be in personal relationships, business, it's our emotions that quite often get carried away and exacerbate the situation or cause us to freak. If we could pull ourselves out and gain a fresh perspective and force ourselves to do that, that's one of the survival tips that I want to pass on. But it works in relationships too. You're in a heated argument with your boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, significant other, kids, workmates. Can you pull you out of that situation, gain perspective, and see this as an opportunity to learn? I've traveled, as mentioned, I've traveled a lot around the world. disasters to disasters, from Indonesia's tsunami to Hurricane Katrina. I was active in the 9/11 response. I was there on day 4 and spent 3 weeks on the rubble pile. All potentially depressing, discouraging things because you're dealing with devastation, loss of life on a huge scale in Haiti. 200,000 people dying in 30 seconds. It's hard to comprehend that kind of loss of life. But yet, I'm generally known as a pretty happy person, and people can't figure that out sometimes. With everything that we witness, yet you're still happy-go-lucky John. It's really about the people. And I would say, to sum up my experiences, humans are humans, no matter where you go. Despite all the imaginary lines that man has made up over the centuries, that we call borders, all the different nationalities that we make up that are all of a sudden really important to us. The bottom line is, people are people. And I've met some amazing people. And it's been my experience with other humans that has really changed and motivated me to keep doing what I do, but also to change how I think. For example, these folks. This is in Haiti. I was there in December of 2010, responding to the cholera outbreak in Haiti. I was there previously, immediately after the earthquake, and I'll tell you, that was devastating. Even after 9/11, my experience there, Haiti was different. A, because of the magnitude. I've never been in a situation, and those with queasy stomachs, I apologize, I won't get into details, but when you see piles of bodies on a sidewalk being burned, that's a little tough to take, no matter what you've experienced in the past. When you see entire families decimated with one sole survivor staring at a crumpled down building, which once was a family home, knowing that your entire family is buried there. That was the experience of these 3 guys. They had all lost their entire families. But they were the first ones, when we pulled up to build this hospital or the field clinic for cholera, they came marching up and said, what can we do to help? We want to make a difference in our community. They've lost everything. There's an 80% unemployment rate in Carrefour, which is where we were setting up this hospital. They didn't want handouts. And I'll tell you, that entire month I was there in December 2010, not one Haitian individual came up to me and said, please, could you give me something? The only thing they asked for was a job. That pride, that self-worth really, really impressed me. I don't know if you can make it out well, but in my hand are these yellow envelopes. And this is a great example of the entrepreneurial spirit, alive and well. We hired about 200 local, about 200 local Haitians to help run this hospital. So an enterprising young man let the secret out that we would only accept applications if they were in a brown manila envelope. Guess who happened to have a whole box of brown manila envelopes for sale at the right price? Well, yeah, he was taking advantage of the situation, but isn't that the pure entrepreneurial spirit? He saw an opportunity, created it, and created a small little business line for himself. We took everyone's applications, but I thought that was just very ingenious on his part. But do these folks look broken? Because again, think about the people of Haiti. They went through that devastating earthquake. Many of them moved into tent cities. 3 months later, the rainy season started. And in many cases, washed away any possessions that they actually had gathered in that 3-month period. Then a hurricane hit them and brushed the island, causing more flooding, more loss of life and of property. Then 6 months later, this mysterious illness called cholera, which has never been on the island for 50 years, strikes, causing tens of thousands to die from this unknown or previously unknown illness. How would you cope with that? If you lost your house, moved into a trailer, then 3 months later, the trailer gets destroyed. Then all of a sudden, SARS happens again, or a new SARS. How would you cope with that? It's that type of opportunity to see what other people have been through and to have that kind of introspection, to think, how would I do that? How would I cope with that? If you get upset because you wait 2 minutes in a Starbucks line, how would you cope with these circumstances? When inconveniences strike, how does that motivate me to adjust my thinking. What do I get excited about when I meet these individuals who have lost everything 3 times? And I was talking with George earlier. When I got home from Haiti, I giggled the first time I turned the tap on and knew I could drink that water. Because we had a chlorinated water treatment plant at the hospital, and trust me, chlorinated water is not fun, even with flavored crystals or whatever else we could find to put in the water to make it more palatable. But just knowing I could turn that on, and you think of the waste and the stuff we have, and it's those opportunities where I feel privileged to have been there and learned, because it's completely changed my perspective on how I approach life back in Canada, and what do I allow myself to get upset over? The guy tailgating me? Pfft. Yeah, I think there's bigger issues in the world to get upset about. I'll probably live longer as a result now, too. And again, we saw the power of humanity. This was day 5 at 9/11 on the rubble pile. You'll see there's quite a few firefighters. You can see the bunker gear. But a large number of these people are just local New Yorkers who showed up to try to help. They didn't have search and rescue experience. They weren't professional first responders. They just really felt compelled to do something. These are the people where I say I've seen the best of humanity. When I see neighbors, after even the tornado that went through Vaughan, all the neighbors gathered together and started cooking for their neighbors who had lost their homes. And said, no, come over, you're staying at my house. We're not gonna let you go stay at a hotel. They never talked to each other before, but they were neighbors. And that power of humanity stepped forward, and that's what I think about when I think why I'm happy to be a human being. Unfortunately, you also see the worst of humanity. I've seen gangs beat up and kill old women for their food, or they'll steal food, mark it up, and resell it to the people they sold it from because they become the sole source supplier for food or of clean drinking water. You see looting, you see gangs, you see the criminal element come out. I try not to dwell on this, but it does tell me something. We have a choice by way of what kind of human being we're going to be. Even though humans are humans are humans, we all have the same basic needs: food, water, shelter, clothing. I've seen that everywhere in the world. We all want to leave the world a little bit better for the next generation. But you have individuals who will take advantage, who do not necessarily behave in a humane way despite being human. It's somewhat of a paradox, isn't it? So our choice really is we could have this attitude, which is very common in North America. You got me in the middle, stuff about me, my stuff I hate, others in the out, and this other nowhere that really doesn't matter to me. To some degree, this is ego, and we all have it to one degree or another. But how much does this influence our decision making in our personal relationships, in our business relationships, and in everything how we conduct ourselves? Allowing somebody to, you come to a stop sign at the same time, allowing them to go forward, or do you always have to make sure that you go through first and everyone else be damned? Just even as a small example. Because these are the little things, because if we are human or humane in the little things, when it comes time for the big stuff, when disasters strike, it's going to be ingrained in us to be human and humane when the bad stuff really does happen. I spent last December up in Attawapiskat. You may remember Attawapiskat's a James Bay community. They declared a disaster last December because of a housing crisis. It was in the news quite a bit. The Harper government got slammed quite a bit. First Nations got slammed quite a bit, and it was quite the media fiasco. It was my first time in an isolated First Nations community where I spent pretty much the entire month there. I learned a lot. There's a lot of prejudice against First Nations and Indigenous people, but the lessons I learned from the elders, from the chief, from the tribal council, and just from some of the local folks in the community were very important life lessons. Now this one is a Cherokee version. but there's a Mohawk version. I just couldn't find a good graphic for it. But it really does help us illustrate what choice we have as human beings. There are two wolves that live within us. One's evil, one's good. Which one's going to dominate is the one we choose to feed. It's food for thought, isn't it? So how do we conduct ourselves? What decisions do we make? How do we interact with others? Really will boil down to what kind of wolf we're going to be, or what kind of a human we're going to be. This is Emergency Management 101. I call it the cycle of emergency management. You identify your risks, you prepare for them. If you can, you prevent them. If you can't prevent it, you mitigate against it, saying, okay, well, if I can't stop it from happening, how do I take steps to lessen the damage or lessen the significance of that event? When crap actually happens, then you have to respond to it, and then you actually try to recover from it, and then it goes all over again. This type of illustration can apply to every element of how we conduct ourselves, whether it be personal life or business, as an entrepreneur. You make your plans, you test your plans, and you test to fail. For example, there's a exercise coming up next month with the Bruce Nuclear Power Plant in Ontario. They're going to be exercising it. If they design the exercise to succeed and pat themselves on the back saying, yeah, we're doing an amazing job, they won't see the weaknesses of their plan. So they are pushing the limits of their planning to see where the weaknesses are, where the failures could be, so that they can make changes in order to have a better plan. Failure is actually the goal in those exercises. So when we're looking at our careers, at our relationships, stretch your limits. Don't be afraid to go beyond. I love this definition. And we as humans love this. Think about relationships. We all have friends that keep getting involved with the wrong type of people, and it's the same type of people that they keep going back to. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So if you have tried starting a business and started a business and it's not working, reevaluate how you're doing it. Because if you're doing it the same way each time, what is it that you're actually becoming by doing the same thing over and over again? Just one quick story. I'm running out of time here, but an older gentleman, he was born in 1897. He paid me to be a traveling companion because he wanted to go back through World War II and his travels through Europe. He was a very, very wise man, and he said, John, every experience is a good experience as long as you learn something from it. Even if there's negative consequences, it can be positive as long as you learn. If you don't learn anything, then it's just a waste of time. So no matter what we face, recognize the fact that no matter what you endure, how you deal with it, how you face it, can make a difference, where you can have a face like this young man who was also orphaned as a result of the earthquake in Haiti. And my last comment is to quote the Dalai Lama. I'm not promoting any religious beliefs, but I couldn't say it any better. What surprised him most about humanity, he said, man, he sacrifices his health in order to make money, then he sacrificed his money to recuperate his health, then he's so anxious about the future that he does not enjoy the present, the result being that he does not live in the present or the future. He lives as if he's never going to die, and then dies never having really lived. So I think most of us are here because we're passionate about something, or we're trying to recover our passion. Live your life with passion. Don't lose that passion, because that is what living is all about. And don't forget to be human, because that is what living is really all about. Thank you.